Hello, everybody. We've finally made it through the serious half of this month, Rosh Hashanah, up until Yom Kippur. Now we are taking on the second half of this very special month that blesses and ushers in the brand new year of 5781. And this second half of the month is filled with joy and happiness and a lot of celebration. We are now in the 4 days between Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, and the holiday of Sukkot, which is coming up tomorrow night. They correspond to the 4 letters of God's name. It's a very special period of time between Yom Kippur and the holiday of Sukkot. Everybody's putting up their sukkah. Everybody's buying the 4 species. Everybody's getting ready with the food for the meals. Everybody's making sure they got good clothes. Everybody's making sure that the wife and the children have everything they need to be happy and joyous. And then we have the holiday tomorrow night of Sukkot. So, I'm going to share with you in this message, chapter 117 of my new book, A Spiritual Soul Book. And it's all about the 7 levels of joy on the holiday of Sukkot. The 7 levels of joy that are open to us and that we can connect with and celebrate and experience and enjoy on the holiday of Sukkot. So without further ado, here's chapter 117 of my new book, A Spiritual Soul Book. If you haven't yet purchased a copy of it, what are you waiting for? You can fill yourself up with so much wisdom and guidance that will help reveal to you the joy, the peace, the blessings that is already in your life, all the opportunities that are around us that you will be able to take from my new book, A spiritualsoulbook.com. You can get it in hard copy, you can get it on Kindle, so there is no excuses. Without further ado, let's start with chapter 117, the 7 levels of joy on the holiday, major holiday, biblical holiday of Sukkot. And let me remind you, when I read through this chapter, which is relatively long, I'm always going to be adding in, it's not exactly word for word, but I'm always going to be adding a little bit of some extra explanation, commentary, which makes it worthwhile to be listening to these tapes and that you wouldn't get from just reading the book alone. And so hopefully this will add a little bit of some deeper richness to what already is fantastic information in the book, A Spiritual Soul Book. So here it is, chapter 117, the 7 levels of joy on the holiday of Sukkot. The very serious Rosh Hashanah, according to the Bible, lasts only 1 day. We celebrate and we observe Rosh Hashanah for 2 days. Even in the Holy Land of Israel, they keep it for 2 days. And that has to do with tradition, and because when they would proclaim the new month, it wasn't always known which day was the beginning of the new year, because people lived far away. Even the ones that lived close, they wouldn't know how to start the day. So everybody, to be on the safe side, kept 2 days, and it's remained that way. But technically, Rosh Hashanah is commanded that we should observe it for only 1 day. The same with the Day of Atonement. Could you imagine fasting for 2 days? Gosh, people have some people have a very difficult time fasting 1 day too. Thank God it's only 1 day. The holiday of Sukkot is celebrated 4 days after the Day of Atonement. As I just pointed out to you, that is very significant because it is imbued with the 4 letters and with the energy of God's essential name, and that's what we draw from the holiday of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And it prepares us for the 4 walls and for the schach, the covering over our heads. We have to go through 4 days in order for us to reach the observance and the experience and the practices of the holiday of Sukkot, which is, according to the Torah, the essence of Sukkot, and what follows right after it is Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. It's all about joy. And God wants us to be happy more than anything else. Not only is the holiday of Sukkot the only holiday that God commands us 3 times to be happy. The Torah says, "V'samachta b'chagecha," you should be happy on this holiday. "V'hoyisa ach sameach," and you should only be happy. "Usmachtem lifnei Hashem Elokeichem," and we're going to mention that again towards the end of this chapter. 3 times the Torah tells us that we should be happy on this holiday, and you're already familiar with the significance of the number 3. And if God commands us to do something, it means that He's already built in the possibility to be able to observe it in joy and in happiness. There is so much packed in this holiday of 7 days, in the holiday of Sukkot. And 7 is also very significant because 7 is a cycle of nature. God created the world in 7 days. And going through 7 days in a state of joy puts a very special spin on the entire creation that we are going to confront all the 7 days in this coming year. On Rosh Hashanah, we accept the authority of God as our master, and on the Day of Atonement, we ask and are forgiven for our sins. Serious. To recognize that God is our master and we accept the yoke of our master, to follow His commandments. He is our king, and we accept that as our reality. And then we may not have lived up to that in the past year, so we have a Day of Atonement to help us put the past behind us, and now we start with a clean slate. After Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, when we sit and live in the godly commandment of the Sukkah, a temporary hut built for the holiday, we are surrounded by a godly act, like being enveloped in a godly hug. When we finally come to the holiday of Sukkot, which is for 7 days, surrounded by the 4 walls, and with a very special covering above our head, we are literally surrounded and living in the atmosphere of godliness for 7 straight days. It's almost like living in Israel. You're breathing air of a mitzvah. You are protected and covered by a mitzvah. You're eating and breathing and talking, all within the performance of a godly deed and a godly act. It's phenomenal to have that opportunity to sit inside a sukkah. The joy of this holiday is celebrated night and day by way of 7 commandments. There are 7 commandments that are related to this holiday. Let's go through it very quickly. I don't point that out in the book, but let's do that here on this medium. What are the 7 holidays, 7 mitzvahs for the holiday of Sukkot? Number 1, we are commanded to eat in a sukkah. Number 2, we are told to shake the 4 species. All 4 species together perform the one mitzvah of shaking the lulav and the etrog. And you need all 4 of those to do the one mitzvah. In the times of the temple, when the pilgrims, were commanded to go up to the temple to see and to be seen, they had to bring a korban chagiga, a sacrifice for the holiday. That's the 3rd commandment. And then they had to bring also a korban simcha, which was a peace offering. That's the next commandment. And then over the holiday of Sukkot, they had to pour water in addition to the wine that gets poured on the altar. They had to pour water, and that has a tremendous explanation and significance attached to it. But here is not the time or the place for that explanation. Then there was the very special willow branch that was brought on Hoshana Rabbah, on the last day of the holiday. And that's because on the last day of the holiday, the water is being judged. That's the final moment when everything is truly sealed, permanently and officially for the coming year. And that's concluded the judgment with what's going to happen in regard to water. And we know that's a very significant ingredient and element to survival and to the existence of the universe. And then there was all the korban oilos, all the fire offerings that were brought. So all of those things that I just mentioned is the 7 commandments that we are commanded to observe on the holiday of Sukkot. Now, commandments, a mitzvah, is a channel through which God connects with us and we connect with God. That's what the mitzvah is. When you have a mitzvah to do something, that's not a burden. It's a tremendous opportunity that God, the creator of the universe, who is infinite, gives us to connect ourselves with him so that we can gain more out of it. God also has something that he fulfills through our observance of the commandment. But who is the one that's immediately going to gain so much out of doing the very special God's will? That's us. We get attached to the source. And they are channels that connect us with God and God with us. And joy, the commandment, and the experience in life, the life experience of joy, is an underlying, permeating energy involved in this connection. That's why it's so important, and the Torah repeats it so many times, and the prophets repeat it so many times, the element of joy in everything that we do, because it's a fundamental thrust and support and energy to everything about ourselves and our worship and service of God. Hence, when we are commanded to do 7 mitzvahs during and over this holiday, it means that there are 7 forms of joy, each level higher than the last, that is accessible during this holiday. When a person is truly happy, the world presents itself as an infinite opportunity of good things. And that is something that the Zohar, the book of mysticism, tells us, that when we are happy, God is happy. And if God is happy, then it makes us even happier. Because as we know, when you are happy, you are always relaxed. You are always benevolent and kind, and you are expansive. When a person is the opposite of happy, everything that I just said crumbles into itself, and it's just the opposite. So happy and joy is a very, very special quality that is important in a person's life. And when it comes to the holiday of Sukkot, and God commands us in 7 different ways to serve him, that means that there are 7 special channels that open up specifically during this holiday, and they become then like a vitamin that we can take that experience with us for the whole coming year. Because in general, that's what all the holidays and holy days are about during this month. They are all about blessings for the entire coming year. So now in chapter 117, I go through what are the 7 different levels of joy that a person can experience and that is open before each individual, specifically during the holiday of Sukkot, and from this holiday for the whole entire coming year and for the entire coming life. And then next year, you'll build on those 7 and make it even deeper, the 7 levels and channels of joy. So the Rebbe, and that's where, of course, my ideas come from, Rabbi Schneerson de Lubavitcher Rebbe, in one of his talks, he says the following: the first 3 levels of joy are related to and inspired by the creation itself. And the next 4 levels are motivated and sparked by the commandments. It's interesting, and I'm going to be pointing that out many different times in the next book, God willing. I'll be writing on quantum physics, quantum mechanics, that many times we see in Judaism the number 7 broken down into 3 and 4. For example, on our tefillin, we have on one side 3 heads to the sheen, and then on the other side we have a sheen with 4 heads, right? So you got 4 and 3, that's 7 again. So we see that idea in many different practices in Judaism, that the number 7, when it does break down, it breaks down into a 3 and into a 4. And that's how these 7 different levels and dimensions and facets of joy also break down into 2 general categories. One category which is inspired by the creation itself, and another category, the higher one, is 4 levels, and that's inspired and sparked by the commandments that God gave us. The first level of joy that a person is able to reach and is given extra strength for that joy during the holiday of Sukkot is obtainable from the mere fact that God created and sustains us. Before creation, there was nothing. Everything in this universe, therefore, is an emanation and an expression of godliness. What we have in this world, as far as mass is concerned, as far as physical objects are concerned, it all comes from the creation of God. Before it was created, there was only God. There still is only God. But then God made a trick, and he created from what there was, which is only him, what we have in this world, and that's the awareness that everything is an expression of godliness. Merely realizing that one's existence and really in truth everything around us is an expression of godliness awakens a very, very deep sense of joy within a person. When you realize that everything around you in the world is godliness, it's an energy of God. Doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter whether you're in the supermarket. It doesn't matter whether you're in your house. It doesn't matter if you're on an airplane. Everything is an expression of God. It was made out of God and from God. That in itself, to be aware of that, is the first level of joy in a person's life. The second level is in the way human beings were created. God decided to create us in his image. Could have made us in many different ways. Could have made us like an animal. Could have made us like a tree. Could have made us like, I don't know what, walking grass. But God decided to make us human beings, as the Bible itself tells us, in his image. One of those features of God that we have within ourselves is that the universe and each individual creation appears self-sufficient, not dependent on God, just as God himself is truly not dependent on anything or anyone. When we say that man, the woman, the human being species was created in God's image, it obviously doesn't mean that God has a nose and 2 eyes and a beard and anything physical, because God is spiritual. But what it means is that the qualities that we have within ourselves, somehow they express the qualities within God. Whether it's the brains, which is the strongest part of our identity, and it's up at the top of our entire body, whether it's the fact that our feet carry the brains. All of those are ideas in a spiritual world and in a spiritual form, and then they developed and they materialized in the shape of our body. So one of the things that is very unique to God is that God is not dependent on anybody, obviously, because if he was, then what he's dependent on would be the ultimate God. So one of the qualities of God is that he's not dependent on anybody. And in the same way that God is not dependent on anything or anyone, we have that feeling. Some people have that feeling, right, that they are self-made, that they are not dependent on anybody else. It stands all on its own. And in addition to this false sense of, I do not need anyone and I can take care of myself, God created us with his self-awareness. Knowledge of this self-awareness, that we are aware of ourselves. We are endowed with this very special quality that I am on top of me and my identity is all about myself. as far as me is concerned. This is another source of joy that a tree doesn't have, an animal doesn't have, that awareness that life begins with my choices and with my thoughts and with my input. So there is a certain sense of third person in my existence. And that's only because God made me in His image. Having that awareness and knowing that it was gifted to me, and that makes me different than any other creature, is another sense of joy and of appreciation. The third level stems from what God created as a reality in time. Special days like the Shabbat, the holy days, to celebrate and be happy. That's another gift that God gave the Jewish people. Special days to celebrate, where we don't have to work, and God says He provides for all our needs. So these very special times that exist within our lives, that are dedicated for holier awareness, that in itself also is another gift to appreciate and be truly grateful about, and therefore joyous that we have it. Animals don't have a Shabbat. Trees don't have a Shabbat. Cars don't have a Shabbat. A car doesn't know that it even exists. Leaves don't know that they exist and that they are endowed with anything special and that they have special times that are different than other times. All of those elements are unique to somebody who realizes these things. And unfortunately, a lot of human beings don't either consider and think about these things. The fourth opportunity and reason for joy is when a person uses his free will that God gave him, which is another of the godly qualities endowed to man, and he makes morally upright decisions in life, choosing always to serve his Creator in practice. This choice will always endow a person with great joy. The fact that a person knows that he has the ability to choose and the power to choose the right thing, and then he does choose to do what is morally correct and what is right for his identity. This gives a person a certain sense of pride in his choice and in his strength. So that's already now getting into the second category of joy that is available to a person who is smart enough and those channels open up for him so that he can take advantage of these very special opportunities. So this is the fourth level of joy, which is within the second category of serving our Creator. The fifth level comes from the specific commandments to serve God in joy. A person is joyous not only because he is able to serve God, but because being happy is a commandment in and of itself. So if I were just to know that I'm so lucky that I am an extension of God, and that God gave me the ability to think about myself in third person, and God gave me times that are different than other times in which I can experience God on a deeper level, like Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, the Shabbat. And then this gives a person a tremendous amount of joy, and then that I could use my choices to do good things. Now, the fifth level of joy is that we are commanded to serve God in joy. Not only am I happy as a natural consequence of the first few concepts and ideas, God gives me a commandment to serve Him in joy. I would have been happy and joyous and grateful and thankful anyway. And on top of that, God gave me a commandment to be joyous. So it's almost like a free opportunity to gain favor and graciousness in the eyes of the Creator. I would have been happy anyway. But on top of that, God gave me a commandment to be joyous. Now I'm even more joyous that I can observe a commandment to be joyous. You figure? It's an unbelievable thing to be aware of. It really deepens the happiness and the satisfaction of existence to be able to know and to be able to be aware and to be able to spend the energy of life doing something of such deep importance. The sixth reachable level in joy is brought about when fulfilling a mitzvah, a good deed, whose exercise contributes joy. An example is when making the Kiddush on Friday night. And our sages tell us there is no joy like that which is brought about through wine. So not only am I happy as a natural consequence, on top of that, God gives me a commandment to be joyous, which makes me even more happier that I can fulfill the commandment to be joyous. And then, how do I become happy? There are certain gifts that God has given the world and mankind, like, for example, wine, and that contributes to the joy. So when I'm making Kiddush on wine, which makes me happy, that is a mitzvah in itself to have Kiddush. And the mitzvah to have Kiddush is going to make me happy because I'm drinking wine, which adds happiness. So we have over here like three kind of levels of a cake on top of each other. We're smearing it one on top of the other. Joy that comes for its own reason. Joy because God commanded me to be joyous. And then to do things that in itself are naturally joyous practices, which we are told to do, like making the Kiddush. And then there is the seventh level, which is the cherry on the top, and is unique to the holiday of Sukkot. This holiday is defined as our season of joy. So, not only is there during this month the Shabbat and the Yom Kippur, which I'm so happy that God gives me an opportunity to repent and to be forgiven for all my sins, everything up until this point, to top it all off, God gives me a Zman Chag Simchaseinu. He gives me a time for festivity. He's like putting the joy on top of itself. So it's like, not only did you give me the cake, but it was a 2-layer cake. It was a 3rd-layer cake. And on top of that, you put cream. And then on top of that, you put on the side a little champagne. And you really heaped it up and piled it up. All the delicacies and all the good things. And these are all the many different dimensions and levels of joy. And when a person experiences all these different levels of joy, as we started out at the beginning, joy is the pillar. Joy is the channel that opens up soul experience. Joy is what makes a relaxation and an openness to life, and an openness that God reciprocates back to us, giving us even more life. So all these different levels of joy are pretty significant if you catch on and you actually become aware and appreciate all these other different ingredients and inputs and aspects of joy that are available. The practices and celebration of Sukkot brings joy for all other holidays. In the Bible, joy is not mentioned with regard to the holiday of freedom, Passover, and is mentioned only once in regard to the season of the giving of the Torah, on Shavuos. The Bible discusses joy 3 times for this holiday of Sukkot, therefore creating the possibility for all the joy that is possible as a 3-layer cake. So it's like 7 layers times 3. Because there's 7 commandments are commanded and are instructed to be experienced in a joyous way times 3. That's how deep the experience and how beautiful and how uplifted and elevated the practice of Sukkot can bring into a person's experience. You know, there's some people who have to take all types of drugs to have out-of-body experiences, and it's all bubamaisis, it's all not good, it's illusions, it's harmful, it's dangerous, it's illegal, it hurts the mind. But here, these are all the expressions of the soul itself in real time and in real terms that a person is able to experience just by observing the holiday of Sukkot in the way God commanded us to observe it. And then we conclude chapter 117. May the All-Merciful elevate the fallen Sukkah of David. That is a prayer that we include in our grace after meals, and in general, we include that in our prayers, because King David, it is from him that the Mashiach, the ultimate good and redemption to the world and clarity to all the confusion that is all around us. So that's one of these prayers that we pray inside the Sukkah, and just in general. May the All-Merciful elevate the fallen Sukkah of David, the edifice of David, and may we all merit the greatest joy very soon, the coming of our holy Mashiach. With this virus going on, and no one sure where it's going to take us, it's an opportunity for us to steer things in such a way that the outcome should be a new world and a new experience for everybody, which will certainly be the case with the coming of Mashiach. Chag Sameach, everybody. Happy Sukkot. Be sure to eat inside a sukkah, as I'm right now talking to you inside the sukkah in Jerusalem at the Waldorf. It's considered, I believe, the biggest sukkah in Israel. I don't know, maybe anywhere in the world, but it's certainly considered as the biggest sukkah in Israel, and it's a beautiful sukkah, as you could see. Make sure that you are eating in a sukkah tomorrow night and Saturday night, which is a biblical commandment to eat something, the meal inside the sukkah, that you shake the lulav and esrog on Sunday, beginning Sunday, for the rest of the week. And then you will be able to experience all these 7 different dimensions and levels of joy times 3, 21, which is the numerical value of Achtoi V'Ches, only goodness and kindness. So go and catch all that energy, and then you will be uplifted and elevated. You will be riding on a cloud from this holiday for the rest of the year. Chag Sameach, everybody.